Welcome to Moving Mattresses in 3-inch heels, celebrating women and the many hats and shoes they wear. Here we will dive into the ups and downs of womanhood with humor, heart, and wisdom, empowering you every step of the way. I'm Julia Jordan, and I'm thrilled to partner with you on this journey. Now, you may be asking yourself, what the heck does moving mattresses in 3-inch heels mean? Well, it's literal. I was literally moving a mattress in 3-inch heels, my favorite pair no less. And I came to the realization that not only can women do anything, we do everything. We're going to focus on 5 pillars: metabolism, meditation, mental health, menopause, and I would be remiss if I didn't add the 5th, medical. It occurred to me when I was putting these metrics together, all 5 of the words do something that most women do not, and that is start with M-E. Start with me. So I'm going to amend my previous statement. Women can do anything, and we do everything, except prioritize ourselves. But it's time to. It's time for us to start with me. If you're ready to laugh, learn, and leap into a healthier, happier you, hit that subscribe button and join our wellness family. Let's go on this journey together of self-consideration as we discover how to start with me. Welcome to Moving Mattresses in 3-inch heels. I'm your host, Julia Jordan, and today's episode is Life Balance and the Blood Sugar Connection with Danielle Hamilton. Hi, Dani.
Hi, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. Let me tell you a little bit about Danielle Hamilton. She is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and a renowned blood sugar expert specializing in blood sugar, hypoglycemia, and reactive hypoglycemia. Dani uses a holistic approach to optimizing blood sugar regulation to help her clients experience more energy, better sleep, fat burning, reduced cravings, balanced hormones, and feel amazing. Dani is the host of the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast and the creator of the Blood Sugar Mastery Program. And we will definitely talk about your program. So thank you again for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat.
For you too. And I'm really glad you're here because I find you to be a voice of reason in a very cluttered and noisy space. There's a lot out there, and some of it you're just like, yeah. But you truly help people, and I think it's probably because it's personal to you. Yeah, and I love your story, and I think a lot of women can relate. I know I can. Going to doctor after doctor and just never getting diagnosed properly.
Yeah, that was definitely my story. I
Yep.
struggled with my health my whole life, and I had lots of colds and ear infections and strep throat and antibiotics. I developed severe seasonal allergies. I had asthma. I had chronic sinus infections. I was getting all these allergy shots, and that was just the history up to my early 20s. And, I had my gynecologist on speed dial. Like, I was getting prescriptions left and right. And I'm like, something has to give here. This is crazy. And I just used to ask, why is this happening to me? And the doctors were like, oh, I don't know, bad genetics, bad luck. I'm like, well, that's pretty disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
So by the grace of the universe, I got a book in my hand called The Paleo Diet Solution by Rob Wolf. And that book totally changed my life. I basically wanted to shout from the rooftops everything that I had been learning. And I switched my diet. I got out processed foods. And like a miracle, all those chronic health issues went away. I never had to give myself another allergy shot. I got off my multiple medications, never had to use either of my inhalers again. I don't have sinus infections. Like, it was just insane. I'm like, they don't tell you this, they just
No.
don't tell you. So then I was just, riding high on the paleo train, and I was so excited about it, eating real food, cooking all this food, and had never cooked anything in my life. Besides eggs. And, I was just like cooking all the time, and I was really enjoying it. And I had a really stressful year. And then I started to develop a lot of new symptoms. So I started
Mm-hmm.
gaining weight, and I had always had acne, but now it was like really bad. It was all over my cheeks, all over my forehead. It wasn't just around my cycles. My cycles were really, really long, and then I didn't get a period for 6 months and then 3 months, and I was like, "Okay, what's going on here?" And I was so tired all the time. I was just, like, sleeping until 11 AM, and that never happened to me, And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, something's happening. And I was eating paleo. So I'm like, okay, I know the answer is not go back and do what you were doing before, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't go back to that because that didn't work either. But what, like, what's there had to be something there. And it
Right.
took me a really long time to figure it out. I did kind of learn that the symptoms that I had were consistent with a diagnosis of polycystic ovarian syndrome. I went to a doctor and I was like, "Listen, I'm working out, I'm eating healthy.
Yeah.
I can't lose any weight." And he's like, "Well, you have to lose weight and you have to take the pill and you have PCOS and there's no cure."
Oh,
It's like, "Oh, lot
okay.
of good helpful advice there. Thanks,
So
doc."
that was an uplifting
So,
conversation.
yeah. So he forced me to take a prescription of a class 1 carcinogen, aka the pill,
Yeah.
out of his office, and I proceeded to rip up the prescription once I got in my car. He literally forced me to leave the office with that. Forced.
Wow.
I'm just like, "I don't want this." And he's like, "Well, you have to take it." I'm like, "Okay." Oh, wow. That is not informed consent. Okay. So that's what like my mainstream doctor experience was like.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, now I'm more motivated than ever to figure
Yeah.
this out because, I was like, I'll show you. So I, just kept eating paleo because I
Mhm.
didn't know what else to do. And I just kept researching and listening to podcasts, and no
Yeah.
one was saying anything that was helping me. And then one day, years later, I heard someone say on a podcast that PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I was like, whoa.
Oh.
I was like, okay, diabetes, doesn't that have to do with blood sugar? I was like, okay, what do I know about blood sugar? Nothing. All
Yeah.
I knew was that I had all these like personality traits, what I thought were personality traits having to do with sugar,
Yeah.
that I was like, well, this is just how I am. This is just my personality. Like I used to always say, I don't have a sweet tooth. All my teeth are sweet. Like I was, like, and everyone always knew that if I went somewhere when I was younger, granted, but like everyone always knew that I wasn't going to eat the dinner and that I would have cereal. And like I always needed something sweet after I ate. I was always thinking about food. I had a granola bar in my purse when I left the house. Like I always had snacks on me. Like heaven
Yeah.
forbid I got hungry. I used to wake up shaky and be like, well, I'm just a breakfast person. And it's like, no, that's actually a sign of blood sugar and metabolic issues. So
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't know that. And so as I started learning about blood sugar, I was like, I thought because I didn't have diabetes, and honestly, no one in my family has diabetes, which I feel like
Mhm.
is rare nowadays, but no one in my family has diabetes. So I'm like, I don't need to pay attention to that. Like I was learning so much about nutrition and health. And I just always skipped over those chapters about blood
Right.
sugar because it was confusing and it was boring. And I was like, well, this doesn't affect me. And I couldn't have been more wrong because there's a lot more that you can have wrong with your blood sugar, to put it
Mhm.
in that sort of way, than just diabetes. Diabetes is not the only blood sugar issue you can have. And that's where I think a lot of people are doing themselves a disservice because even the term pre-diabetes, it's like, oh, I have pre something wrong with me. Like I still don't even have something wrong with me. But 93% of adult studies are showing now have some sort of metabolic dysfunction. And that means blood sugar, insulin resistance, leptin resistance, this whole metabolic arena, which we don't really even know what that is. People are like, metabolism. Okay, I have a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism. Like, we don't even know what these terms mean. Like, sort of just learned these things, digging
Right.
into all of that. And basically, metabolism is your body's ability to get energy for all of your cells to use. So, can all your cells get and create energy? That's what metabolism is. And so, when we see this breakdown of metabolic function, and usually one of the manifestations of that is blood sugar issues, although there's other hormones and things, blood sugar is not always the first thing to go awry.
Mhm.
And that's what our doctors may be testing for. So they're missing this. That's the bottom line. They're missing these diagnoses. They don't use good ranges. And so people are then identified when some people know when they're pre-diabetic, but people are getting told when they're, already have type 2 diabetes. And this is preventable. This is also reversible, so that's also good news.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So type 2 diabetes is a reversible condition, and doctors don't see it that way. They are not taught that it is. There's I just interviewed an amazing he's a intensive care doctor,
Yes.
and he's like, during COVID, I learned that type 2 diabetes is reversible. I'm like, during COVID, you learned that? Like, it's just wild. So he's like, ask any of my colleagues, they wouldn't know. So this isn't coming from me, who obviously has a thing against mainstream medicine. This is coming
Mm,
from the mouths of doctors. They're just not taught this. So when I go to my doctor and say, hey, I have PCOS, their only tool to help me is a prescription pad. And there's no prescription that you can take to reverse these metabolic disorders. I would say some of these peptides could help, but yeah, that it's not a pill thing. It's a lifestyle, and it's an environment and a diet thing.
yeah. And that's all stuff that you talk about. And I think it's so important. And traditional medicine does have its place, but it's proving more and more to be limited in its scope and what it can do. And I think, doctors care, but they can only do so much. And I think a lot of it sometimes is insurance driven too. And you're
Mhm.
talking about 93% of people. So that's almost the entire population. And I don't think it would be um, a stretch to say most of us have no idea. I know you talk about having dysregulated blood sugar.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's got to be so many of us. And so, what are some signs? What can we look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great next place to go. So, blood sugar symptoms, unfortunately, look different for every single person. And the main thing to remember is that the sort of the more severe the metabolic dysfunction, the
Hmm.
more symptoms you have and the more severe they will be. So the early signs of blood sugar dysregulation usually show up when people get hungry. And so their hunger starts to be what I would characterize as unhealthy hunger. So let's go back to thinking about, like, in the wild, if a tiger has not caught a meal in
Hmm.
days and it's really hungry, is that tiger gonna be, like, laying there and, like, listless and, like, no, it's gonna be, like, up and moving to look to go get food.
Yeah.
So even though that tiger is hungry, it doesn't have a lack of energy, okay? So that's an important thing to
Yes.
keep in mind, because it's like,
Okay.
"Oh, yeah, healthy hunger shouldn't take me out. When I'm hungry, I should not be getting brain fog, anxiety, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, feeling shaky, anxious, have cravings, start sweating, have heart palpitations, headaches. Those are common symptoms of that people get with their hunger. They're like, oh, I know I'm hungry because I'm starting to get a little irritable, aka hangry,
Yes.
right? Like, we
Right.
know this term, hangry.
Right.
So those if your hunger comes with symptoms, it's a that is your first sign that there's some metabolic issues happening at the root. So, for example, and that used to be me. So, I'm gonna call
Yes.
myself out. Like, I was a person who could never think about missing a meal. I'm like, "Fasting? Are you kidding me?" Like, I am, like, to the dot, and I was always grazing on stuff to prevent myself from feeling hunger. Why?
Hmm.
Because my hunger felt terrible. It felt like I was gonna die. I hated feeling hungry. When the only time I let myself get hungry was because I had to do some fasting blood work, and my head felt like it was a balloon. I almost passed out, like, I almost fell backwards on the street after the blood work, and I'm like, "Oh, wow, I'm such a breakfast person." I didn't
Hmm.
realize that my blood sugar at that point was 60. That's quite low, and so I was hypoglycemic. I was the other end of this, blood sugar spectrum, but
Yes.
still it was not ideal. So if you are a person who carries food with you wherever you go, chances are there's some sort of hypoglycemia thing happening. So as the blood sugar dysregulation worsens, because then what do we do? What do we do if we're getting hungry? We're getting hungry before it's time for lunch. We're not missing a meal, or we're like, oh my God, I need to eat something right now. Like, I'm really shaky, or I'm getting anxious, or I'm getting, my mom used to say, edgy. So that word is popping into my head. Like, she's like, I get edgy when I'm hungry.
Okay, mom.
So yeah, I remember that from, as a kid.
Yeah.
And so if that's you, are you making always the best choices? Chances are, if you have this urgent hunger, if you have this symptomatic hunger, what's going to happen is you're going to look for your body is looking for a quick bump up of the blood sugar because it's going down. And
Yes.
your body has lost the ability to regulate. We should, as our blood sugar dips down, because think about blood sugar needing to be in like this Goldilocks zone, not too high, not too low. So if it's starting to dip down because we haven't eaten in a while, our liver should be like, don't worry, I got you, girl, and just give us a little sugar because it stores sugar. No big deal. So then our blood sugar line should be normal. It should
Yes.
be riding in that normal range. But we often lose that ability because we've spiked our blood sugar so much and because insulin goes high. And actually, there's another hormone that I've been learning about that actually happens even before the insulin, which is leptin. And this has to do a lot with our light environment, which we can get into. But basically, we're, under blue light at night, we're with our devices, we're inside all day, we're being sold food. This is nobody's fault, by the way. This is the stuff they're selling to us and,
Right.
what they're telling us to eat. Like I
Yeah.
had blood sugar issues when I was trying to be healthy. But then they're, telling us we need to snack all day and do all these things. And this is raising our leptin levels, raising our insulin levels. And then those hormones are saying, we need to stop fat burning right now. We need to stop using any stored energy because there's a famine here.
Mhm.
So, there's something that's causing us to be in this fat storage mode. We need to store this fat for later. There's a problem. So, all of these lifestyle and environmental factors are setting us up to not be able to utilize our stored body energy, which is the stored sugar in our liver or our body fat. So, overnight, we should also be able to tap into body fat when we haven't eaten in a while. If I ate dinner at 5 and then it's 4 in the morning, that's a long time. So by then, my liver may have run out of that sugar, but my body would be like, oh, no problem. Got you, girl. Here's some, here's some, here's some. And it should just be able to burn that fat. But again, if we have high insulin, if we have dysregulated leptin, the signals the body is getting is don't touch that fat. So then we're just dependent on this sugar. So then what do
Yes.
we have to do? We have to eat. And if our hunger is very urgent, we're in the next drive through. We're putting food on the table for the kids and eating some of their stuff. We're not saying like, oh, I'm going to go grill up that grass-fed steak in my fridge and make some local organic seasonal broccoli. No, we're making choices that we're then mad at ourselves about, but
Right.
it's because a blood sugar crash is going to overpower a, our our willpower every single time. And that's
Yes.
where if we have this unhealthy hunger, if we have metabolic issues, it's not about willpower at that point because our body is not able to get the energy that it needs, which is what I told you guys is metabolism, right? So
Right.
this is the window into that. As these symptoms start to get worse, so like as we're making these worse food choices, we're eating more often, what's happening is that our blood sugar dysregulation and metabolic issues are getting worse. And so head to toe, we're going to start to see issues and it's going to be dependent on the person. We could have a lot of brain issues like anxiety, depression, brain fog, memory loss. Alzheimer's is being called
Yes.
type 3 diabetes, macular degeneration of the eyes, any sort of itis, because insulin resistance is an inflammatory process. And so any sort of inflammation, feeling puffy, having joint pain. I used to have a lot of tendinitis. No more tendinitis. It's like, oh, that's weird. People struggling to lose weight, hormone issues. That's how it manifested for me. I had PCOS, PMS, PMDD, anything that started with a P, I had.
Yeah.
And it dysregulates all those hormones because insulin is a hormone and insulin is a hormone that gets released after we eat sugar. So we have the cortisol stuff happening because if our blood sugar's crashing after we eat or because we're not eating, we're getting pumped with stress hormones to bring that blood sugar back up. And that's stressful for the body. It's stressful to have those highs, to be out of that Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
And then we start to see issues, cardiovascular issues, high blood pressure, strokes, things like that, and arrhythmias and gut dysbiosis, fatty liver. I mean, just pick an organ And there, if you have high blood sugar, crashing blood sugar, insulin resistance, it can negatively affect every single one. My acne went away when I stabilized my blood sugar. Like, it's just unbelievable. And then you get a lot of cholesterol issues, all the stuff your doctor gets mad about.
Hmm.
Like, oh, your cholesterol's off the charts, your triglycerides are off the charts. Like, that's when it starts to, but that's when the doctor will care. But then they put you on a statin. Then they put you on a blood pressure med. And what's the problem? The root cause of this is your metabolic dysfunction. And we can take it to the level of working on your blood sugar to balance out these hormones. It's the gateway in. It's something we can easily measure and we can know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to go the route of drugs. I'm not telling anyone that's not medical advice. I'm saying that we can avoid that and we can choose to do something else. So,
It's preventative, but if it's not being talked about, I mean, this should be a lot more mainstream than it is. And I didn't realize, and I think most people don't realize just how connected blood sugar is to what you just said, every organ, your whole entire life, health.
energy levels,
Yeah,
sleep, like every process, every
everything.
organ. Yeah.
It is
Mhm.
incredible. I mean, I didn't even realize that. And like I said, I don't think most people do. You were talking about leptin resistance and insulin resistance. I think a lot of people are familiar with insulin resistance, even if it's just we
Mhm.
hear it all the time. What is leptin and
Yeah.
what is that resistance? What does that do?
Sure. So, leptin is a hormone that is made in our fat cells, and leptin's job is to go up every night to this control tower in our brain called the hypothalamus, and it's going to give this energy rundown report. So it's going to say, "All right, Dani has this much body fat. She has this much stored sugar in her liver and her muscles, and you know what? It's a little excess. So
Hmm.
tomorrow, I want you to lower her appetite a little. Feel free to burn that off because we're good. We're golden." That's what we want leptin to do. That's how it regulates
Okay.
our hunger, our weight. But when something blocks leptin from communicating to that hypothalamus, which could be cortisol, which could be insulin, the 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 hypothalamus is always going to prefer those two hormones over leptin. So I like to think about like insulin like this like hunky guy and then uh, that leptin's kinda like this nerd with the report and pushing up his glasses being like, like, "Oh, I have your report." It's like, "Not now, insulin's here." So, what are like, so then when these other hormones are blocking leptin from communicating,
Hmm.
leptin does not the hypothalamus doesn't get the report, and then your body's like, "Oh my god, Dani is starving. Like, there must be a famine because I didn't get the report. She must have no body fat. She must have like, we need to she doesn't have any reserves. So whatever you do, just slow down everything." So slow down the reserve, like, do not burn the fat. Don't like tap into the stored energy because we need to save any last reserves because something bad is happening. What happens here is that this comes down to a lot of our habits, and this is where light comes in. So
Yes.
leptin is a hormone all about light. And so I keep talking about light, I keep coming back to light, and I used to think I'm like, well, food is way more important, but it's not. It's light. I mean, we from our earliest human history, we have always lived outside. We evolved with the sun and these periods of brightness and darkness. And that's how the body has learned how to tell time, which is just such an important thing because we always need to know what time it is. If you fall asleep, wake up from a nap, you're disoriented, what do you try to do?
Hmm.
Figure out what time it is. Why do you need to know what time it is? So you know what to do. Why am I not going out and grabbing the Christmas decorations? Because it's not December. Like that would
Exactly.
be ridiculous. Why
Yes.
am I not getting ready for bed? Because it's
Yeah.
not nighttime.
Right.
I'm only on this podcast because I know what time it is. Our
Yeah.
bodies are the same. So if our bodies don't know what time it is, how is it going to know when to secrete a thyroid hormone, when to start detoxifying your liver, when to detoxify your brain, when to heal this tissue, when to
Hmm.
secrete this thing, when to digest this thing? We need to know what time it is. Think about our body like an airport. That hypothalamus is that control tower. And so we need everything, all the flights on time, all the flights, God forbid there's like some sort of weather and it's like chaos in the airport, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing to our body. We're like making these artificial thunderstorms and we're
Mhm.
We're in darkness when we shouldn't be. We're turning on lights, and that our bodies, because we've evolved to be able to have light as a signal, which by the way, light is our primary signal of what to do and when. Eating is second. So our meal timing is second. But I think that's because food contains light information. So if you think
Oh.
about it like plants, it's every organism on earth, with the exception of like some tiny creatures by dark sea vents on the bottom of the ocean floor, almost every single like living creature or
Yeah.
life on earth is trying to get energy from the sun. That's where our energy comes from the sun. And it also can come from the earth in the form of stepping on the earth and getting electrons. So I'm getting ahead of myself. But this idea of telling what time it is really important so we know what to do. So, one of the things that our body's better at doing at certain times than others is digesting and metabolizing food. We're way better at that during the daytime, and we're
Mhm.
way worse at that after the sun goes down.
Yeah.
When it's nighttime, when it's late, our bodies are just not meant to do that at that time. So, what happens is that we eat late at night. Our insulin sensitivity is worse, meaning we're going to have a worse blood sugar response to that meal, even if, let me not go off on all the tangents. I have so much to say. I have so much to say about this. But so if we eat late at night, we're going to have a worse blood sugar response to our meal. It's
Mhm.
going to raise our insulin, and then it's going to block leptin from communicating to the hypothalamus. That's going to create leptin resistance. And so the next day, the body's like, Dani is starving. I didn't get the rundown from leptin. I need you to increase her appetite because she probably doesn't have any body fat. I need you to increase her appetite. And why don't you make her a little anxious? So she goes out and gets food. It's like, oh, doesn't that sound like everybody who's struggling with their metabolic health and their blood
Yes.
sugar?
Yes.
So that leptin piece is at the root. And the other thing that impacts leptin, I've been talking about light all this time.
Yeah.
Well, you may probably by now potentially have heard about things like blue blocking glasses and blue light. And it's like, what's the big deal with blue light? The sun makes light that is blue. Our sky is blue. So like, why is that bad? Well, we actually those receptors in our eyes and on our skin, they evolved to receive the signal from blue light. And that's what tells time. That's the primary time giver to the body is blue light. But in the sun, the blue light is always paired with more than 50% red and infrared light. Red and infrared light is very healing, very calming, very soothing to the body. Red light, I have this big red light therapy panel behind me. These red light, which is over 50% of the sun's rays, red and infrared, makes our mitochondria burn through glucose faster and actually lowers our blood sugar, which is amazing. But blue light does the opposite.
Mm.
Blue light, basically, it raises our cortisol, it raises our blood sugar, and it raises our insulin. So at night, when historically we never would have been exposed to blue light, we're flipping on lights and the light bulbs have changed. Now they're not incandescent, they're LED. They're cool LED lights, most of them. And they have these giant spikes of blue light if you see their spectrum. The other incandescent lights weren't like that. They contained infrared. Not anymore. We took out all the infrared, we took out all the red, and now we have this blue centric light. Our devices emit so much blue light. And so what that's doing is, especially at that time of day, the body's like, okay, I guess it's still 2 p.m. And so it's like, keep doing the 2 p.m. stuff. And now it's producing all this cortisol, which, you mentioned, Julia, that you're working on regulating your
Yeah.
cortisol. A lot of people, they're tired all day, but they're wired at night and can't
Mhm.
fall asleep. It's your light and it's driving up our blood sugar. It's messing up our metabolic health. And I've seen the most amazing stories from my clients where just by wearing these orange blue blockers at night, their blood sugar is coming down. There's scientific studies on this as well. Their blood sugar is coming down, they're sleeping better. Anything that improves our sleep is going to improve our metabolic health and our blood sugar. And people are waking up and they no longer have these high morning fasting blood sugar. And especially when they go outside and see sunrise, because the light at sunrise is loaded with this healing red and infrared light.
And
So it's amazing.
I am going to tell
Thank
you,
you.
and this sounds crazy, but it really does work. So when I started going outside for sunrise and facing east, and if you have an
Mhm.
iPhone, there's a compass in the utility app. You can just stay on and go till east shows up. But I feel a million times better when I take that time at sunrise, and it's maybe 5, 7 minutes that I'm outside. It makes all the difference in the world, to the point that it's almost ridiculous that that little thing that like you wouldn't even think about actually works. And I got that from you, and you were touching all over one of the things that you focus on is circadian strategy and,
Mm.
using light, using timing. And um, I think when people are listening to this, they're like, okay, obviously I need to make a change. Need to make a lifestyle change, but I don't know what to do. And that was me. And one of the things that I had learned from you was, just been listening to your podcasts and, your Instagram and reading your blog with circadian strategy and trying to implement it in my life. But it's one of the easiest things you can do because it just sits there and it tells you what you need to do. It's like 6:32. It's the sunrise, go outside, eat
Yeah.
within an hour of sunrise. I mean, it's just like really basic and easy, but it can make such a difference in your life. Can we talk about that just
Yeah.
briefly? And then I know you're on a, uh, thing now about the UVA light and really like
Yeah.
what that's doing. So if we can just kind of briefly get on those, just because I think it'll help people from a lifestyle change standpoint.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So let's start quickly, recap night and then move into daytime. So we
Yeah.
just keep everybody like have this like sort of linear movement here. So we talked about how it's really important to not eat after the sun goes down. This is a little harder in winter, but eating as early as you can before bed is going to be supportive of our blood sugar and our hormones. And then when the sun goes down, that's when we want to turn our house into like sunset mode, and so we want to turn off all overhead lights. And then I invested in like an orange light bulb, a red light bulb for my bedroom, and these orange blue blocking glasses, and I just turn those on at night and I can still see, and then you get tired, like you can't help but to fall asleep. And then
Okay.
taking that blue out of your environment is really really helpful. You can turn your phone screen, there's different settings. So if I go 1, 2, 3 and I click the side button, it turns my phone screen red, so you can set that up in the settings. There's Iris software for your computer. So there's a lot of different things that we can do to mitigate this light. I'm not saying, hey, everyone needs to live like a pioneer and, light a candle or,
Yeah.
or just go to bed. We we can have these just little mitigation strategies that can be really supportive. So blocking blue light at night, even if it's just like, okay, I turn on the oven light instead of the overhead light.
Okay.
Huge difference. That's gonna be helpful. Unscented beeswax candles, like, you might have, some sort of unscented candle perhaps, or, um, I'm big into the unscented because candles are pretty toxic, but, a light bulb for my bedroom, $7 on Amazon, red light bulb, so one of my lamps has a red bulb, one of them doesn't. I mean, super easy, really simple things that we could just get started with. That's
Okay.
gonna help you fall asleep better.
Yeah.
It's gonna, like, you will have to fight sleep, honestly, because
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, really helpful for bringing that cortisol down, because if blue light is up, guess what is happening? The cortisol's up and the melatonin is down. Melatonin is our other circadian hormone that helps us with sleep, but also drives every single repair process, almost every single one in our body.
Mhm.
And so we need complete darkness at night, especially when we're sleeping. We need complete darkness for melatonin to be released. So having a really, really, really dark bedroom is also going to be really important. And please don't charge your phones in your bedroom, because EMFs are like an invisible form of light. We want to be turning off our router as well. Really important to mitigate EMFs as much as possible. I'm not going to
Okay.
open or go down that whole rabbit hole, but those are just two little simple
Yeah.
things. Turn off the router, charge the phone in another room. Boom.
Okay. Because
Easy.
my
There.
phone's right next to my head. It's on my
Yeah.
nightstand, and nobody thinks anything of it. I didn't even know that. So
Yeah.
good
So
information.
if you get an EMF meter from Amazon, that thing would be going wild. It's worse when it's charging. So
Oh,
you're basically radiating your head like those
awesome.
AirPods. I'm
Okay.
also going to tell you, unfortunately, they radiate your brain
Okay.
because it's like your brain's in a microwave. So because that's what radiation is. That's what these EMFs are.
So
It's
back to the ones with cords, huh?
back to
Got it.
these are I know these are EMF blocking
Okay.
headphones.
I'm
All right.
getting them.
So we've nailed our nighttime. Make these changes slowly. Super simple, easy things you can start doing today, like charging your phone somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Get an old school alarm clock if you need it, something like that. Okay. So now let's talk about the morning. The very first light we want to get in our eyes is the light of the sun. So if you wake up before sunrise, especially in winter months when the days are shorter and you're like, you need to drive kids to school or you need to make breakfast, whatever, that's when we want to put these orange blue blocking glasses back on. These orange glasses, they are I always think if the sun is down, these are on because I
Okay.
don't want to have any light. If it's not bright outside, I should not be getting any light because that's what my aunts think about, like what our ancestors do. So
Mhm.
this is going to block the blue light from getting in my eyes, from telling my body it's daytime.
Okay.
Okay. So then the first light in our eyes is sunrise light or morning light. Ideally, if we can get out at daybreak when the sun first light first starts to appear, or at least at sunrise. And sunrise is when the sun comes over the horizon, and it's the first time in the day that blue light is now present in our environment. This is when we want it. Blue light is not bad. We
Yeah.
need it, but we only want it at the right time. So now we get that gentle increase of blue light through the morning. That's going to gently turn on our cortisol. It's not going to be like, this like big blast from our phone, or we open the fridge or we turn on a light. It's
Yeah.
a little trickle of cortisol. It's not like a whole river, right? So think about we want that gentle, gradual rising of the sun and the blue light, and it's loaded. Think if you don't have a red light therapy panel, there's like thousands of peer-reviewed studies on the efficacy of, and the benefits of red light therapy. If
Okay.
you're like, well, I don't want to, spend money on a device, you want it for free, go outside at sunrise. It's like a giant red light therapy panel. And this is what helps people lower their morning glucose.
Mm.
It's amazing what it does. So it's very healing, very anti-inflammatory. And if you pair it with standing on the earth or touching a plant that's rooted into the earth, that's called grounding. And I used to think like, "Oh, okay, grounding, like, yeah, okay, it has some benefits, unbelievable benefits from grounding." And a key concept to understand is that we're only supposed to get about a third of our energy from food, which is like, oh, like what's the other two-thirds? Caffeine? Like people, like, but so we're only supposed to get a third from food. The other so food breaks down to electrons. Electrons go down the electron transport chain in our mitochondria and make ATP, if we remember that from science back in the day. It also makes cellular water. It makes a lot of other stuff, but that's kind of how we know these electrons, blah, blah, blah. They make ATP, they make energy. So that's how we get energy from food. But also, when you step on the earth, because lightning hits the earth, it's negatively charged, it's loaded with electrons. Electrons have a negative charge. So the second we come into contact with the earth and our bare skin, it could be a finger, it could be a toe, it could be sitting down, you start to soak up electrons. And those electrons go down the electron transport chain to make ATP and water. So, okay, like that's another way we can get energy. Like, oh my gosh, that's unbelievable.
It
And then
is.
there's more ways we can get energy without food. When UV light hits our skin, it also creates electrons. When we move, there's a process called piezoelectricity and we create electrons. So people who have metabolic issues struggle to get energy. So the main symptom that most of us feel when we don't have our metabolisms working for us is tired. We're
Yeah.
just tired and we need caffeine and snacks and things to keep our energy up. And then we take away carbs and we're like, oh, I'm so tired. It's because your body's not utilizing all the energy sources. And so we can step on the earth. I mean, who would have thought? Like, it's amazing. So,
It
as
really is.
often as you can, and it also mitigates EMF. So, stepping on the earth is like an amazing way to sort of dispel some of the harms of the EMF. It's important for cellular hydration. It's amazing. So we're looking at the sun, seeing sunrise, stepping on the earth, and then UVA light is the next period of time. So there is an app called the Circadian app. You can go to circadian.life and download it if you wanted. I'm not associated with them, but just big fan. And that's where you were talking about. You can put in your location, and then
Right.
it tells you when the sun rises, when UVA is, when UVB is, when the sun goes down, when to turn off your devices. I have notifications on my phone all
Yep.
the time that just tell me, I'm like, oh, I got to get outside. Um, and so with UVA, it's just this amazing light that it makes the body produce endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and thyroid hormones, amongst other things. So, a lot of people struggle with depression, not feeling motivated, feeling anxious. I mean, who doesn't want all these amazing brain chemicals and the boost to the metabolism because it's creating thyroid hormone? So many people have sluggish thyroids. Is it like, are you just you might have all the precursors to make thyroid hormone, but if you never go out in the sun and get that signal, like it's time to release the thyroid hormones, then it won't happen. So a lot of this is it just sort of that's what sort of solidified this idea that light is so important because it's the primary driver of our biology. Our biology doesn't just work because we want it to. It's taking cues from its environment of what to do. And so if we can just sync a little bit more with nature at these very targeted times, we just get so much bang for our buck. It's like it's every single process in the body. And so the other thing that UVA does, besides make you feel phenomenal, is it also helps us start to produce melanin, which is an amazing molecule that helps us burn fat. It lowers our appetite, and it's basically like a sunscreen. It can sequester heavy metals. It's anti-inflammatory. It's so many things. And melanin, if you sort of recognize that word, it's what makes our skin pigmented.
Hmm.
And so it is this amazing molecule that can really help us to regulate our appetite, but also to prepare our skin to get UVB light. Why is UVB light so important? That's the next time of the day. UVB light is so important because it is the light that makes, once it hits our skin, helps our body produce vitamin D. And some people are like, well, Dani, I'm just going to take it in a supplement. Hearing all these things about the sun, do you think that uh, some supplement made in a factory can replace any part of this like whole symphony of light that and benefits that we're getting from the sun? The answer is no. It does not replace it. And so I'm just starting to learn more and more about vitamin D, but it is one thing that is extremely important for metabolic health and for our immune system. It's anti-inflammatory, all these things. So if we are getting all this nice morning light and preparing our skin properly, then we can start to go out in this UVB range of light for longer and longer amounts of time. And we can start to develop what's called a solar callus, AKA a tan. And doesn't everybody look better with a tan?
Yes.
Um, and I will say that the lighter your skin, the less time you need outside in UVB to get sufficient vitamin D. The darker your skin, the more time you need outside because it's like you have so much sunscreen on. Basically, you have all that
Yeah.
natural sunscreen.
Okay.
So, if you're very dark skinned and you live far from the equator, there's a really big mismatch there. And unfortunately, our darker skinned friends are at a really big disadvantage
Yeah.
being further away from the equator. So it's really extra important for them to really prioritize getting this light.
Hmm.
And then people who fall into it's called the Fitzpatrick scale. So from 1 to 6, so the lower Fitzpatrick number, so you would probably be like maybe a 2 or something like that. I'm about like a 2 or 3, probably closer to a 2. But I have pale skin. My ancestry is from Sweden and from Italy. So I do tan, but what you want to do is you want to slowly build that callus over time,
Hmm.
basically like a base tan. And so you want to stay out for short amounts of time, flip and then get out of the sun. And then the next day or the next couple of days, try again. And you don't have to I'm not suggesting go in the direct sunlight, highest peak of the sun and fry. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying really careful, deliberate sun exposure to build that solar callus. And then you can stay out for longer and longer without sunscreen,
Hmm.
without needing, because sunscreen blocks all vitamin D conversion. So we want to try to avoid it as much as possible. And then you can cover your face, you can use hats, you can use shade, you can use clothing
Hmm.
to protect yourself. But that's a really important thing. And then finally, we want to expose ourselves to that afternoon sun, sunset type sun, because what's happening then? Again, the red light. And what does red light do? It's amazing for the skin. It's anti-aging. It helps heal sun damage. It's it's anti-inflammatory. It builds collagen. It reduces wrinkles. And it's like, oh, when you say it like that, it makes sense that the sun was meant to be experienced throughout the entire day. It was never meant to be like, "Oh, let's just run to the beach from 1 to 3 PM and then go home." That's not smart sun exposure because you're only just giving yourself this burst of UVB and your skin is not ready for it, and that's where we run into problems.
Right.
But if we see the sunrise, we get the UVA, we start building the melanin, we do longer and longer periods in the UVB, and then we get that sunset light or a red light therapy panel to heal that skin, that is how the sun is meant to be absorbed and experienced. And that is how it can be so health promoting and regulating. And I mean, there's so many benefits of UVB besides vitamin D. And there's so many types of vitamin D, just besides the one that we measure, there's like 15 sort of like types of vitamin D. So it's just, we're missing the picture when it's just like, oh, I'll just take a supplement. I
Right.
look at vitamin D deficiency as like a sunlight deficiency.
Yeah.
And so we can consume it in this way. And the thing that makes me so excited about this is that number one, it's free. And, everything costs money. It's like, there's memes about like, oh my God, I can't go outside. It's too expensive out there.
Right.
But it's like, okay, this is actually free and it makes you feel so good because you're getting all these amazing endorphins and fat burning and
Yeah.
appetite reduction. I mean, it's like
Everything you're
unbelievable.
explaining is what everybody's trying to do. Is like like they're
Yes,
looking for the magic pill to improve their
it's right up
mood.
there,
I know, improve their
right outside
mood.
your window.
Exactly. Who knew? But I mean, honestly, it's just like I'm starting, like I'm newer to it, but it's like it really does work to like focus and pay attention. And like I had mentioned, like just going out for that few minutes at sunrise does make a difference. I know it sounds crazy, but it's
Yeah,
the truth. But
yeah.
people are looking to improve mood, increase metabolism, just live a healthier,
Improve their
happier life.
energy.
And it's out there in the light. Can we talk just very briefly? I know
Mhm.
we want to wrap this up, but I definitely want to talk about your blood sugar mastery program because it is a life-changing program. I know you teach about people controlling their blood sugar, controlling them, but like what is it and who is it for?
Blood Sugar Mastery is a program for anyone who is struggling with suspected or known blood sugar issues, metabolic issues. If you are low in energy, you don't sleep well, you have cravings, you want to lose weight, you're just not feeling well, your doctor's mad at you because your blood sugar is creeping up, or any of these things, and you just want to feel better. Blood
Hmm.
Sugar Mastery is designed for you. It's the program that I needed when
Yeah.
I was struggling. And so there's video modules, there's coaching calls, there's a private community, and it's a small group like very intensive coaching program. So it's not like you submit questions and I answer a random question and give this vague answer. Basically, like I'm one-on-one coaching every single person. I know their entire history, and so everyone gets individualized coaching on all of the calls. So it's sort of like a VIP experience because it's very nuanced. And
Hmm.
so I want people to have I just don't I'm just not into, like, this generalization. I talk like this all the time and give tons of free advice, but people need to know for them, like, they've been through a lot, and everyone is so different, and I'm a really big believer of bio-individuality, and
Hmm.
so I wanted my program to be able to encompass that without it it's not at all a one size fits all type of a
No.
thing. So, in the program, I've added the information on light and circadian rhythms as a foundational piece, but I also talk a lot about what to eat, when to eat, and how to personalize it to you. And one of the things we didn't talk about is that, you know, a lot of people have been skipping breakfast and they're like, oh, I don't eat till 1 p.m. And they're
Mm,
so proud of themselves. And I'm like, I would have been proud of you a while back, but I know too much now.
right.
And unfortunately, that fasting and skipping breakfast is often it works until it doesn't, and it starts to drive high cortisol. And so having breakfast early, these are the things. So
Yeah.
so I help you, but also sometimes it's like, "Oh my god, I've been skipping breakfast forever and I've been staying up late." And it's like, how do I put all these pieces together
Hmm.
without feeling so overwhelmed and without making too many changes too quickly that it's just unsustainable. And so that's what I really help people do. I honestly, most of what I do is slow people down, Julia,
Yes.
because they're just trying to change too many things too soon because they're
Yeah.
like, well, I need to change this. Am I light in my food? And I'm like, we all need to take a collective deep breath and say that we're all going to be fine
Yeah.
and that we're going to pick one thing to do. So
Mhm.
like I give people an action plan at the end of each coaching call. Everyone gets their personal action plan of like 1 to 3 things to work on depending on where that person's at. If someone's newer in their journey and they're like just starting with eating real food, it's like, okay, I have to start reading ingredients and I can't eat this, salad dressing anymore. And their whole world is kind of turned upside down because a
Yeah.
lot of the foods that they're used to, it's like, okay, those aren't on the list, those aren't what we're gonna
Right.
be eating. And so someone like that, I'm gonna handhold them through that process because it could be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Some people have been at this for a while and they're like, I've done these things and I need help. And so everyone gets a continuous glucose monitor in the program and uses that to help again personalize things to us. So we didn't talk about glucose monitors or CGMs, and they're just these amazing tools that help you
Yeah.
see what happens to my blood sugar when I eat this, when I go in the sauna, when I do this exercise overnight, if I have a stressful conversation. Like it starts to help you connect what's going on with your symptoms with what your blood sugar is doing. And that is so valuable because I can't say like, "Oh, just eat this amount of this carbohydrate." I have
Mhm.
no idea what that's going to do for your blood sugar because it depends on how much muscle do you have? How well did you sleep last night? Where in your cycle are you? Are you postmenopausal? What time of day is it? What was the lighting? What did you eat before that? Did you have caffeine? Are you sick? Like, there's so many factors that impact our blood sugar. So I try to help take all this confusion out of it. So by the end of the 8-week program, you're like, I know what to eat to make me feel good. I have people have so many wins so quickly, like eating fewer times in a day, no more blood sugar crashing, sleeping through the night, dreaming again for the first time, getting their period back after not having it for 4 years. That has happened multiple times. People getting pregnant, no more acne, losing weight. I mean, just unbelievable changes happen. I have people like with random symptoms. Like someone was like, my main symptom is pain. I was like, oh, like, I hope I can help you.
Mm.
And yeah, sure enough, she's like, okay, 3 weeks in, 90% of my pain is gone.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
it's
It's
just
incredible.
it's unbelievable.
And
Yeah.
I love that you customize and you really take a personal approach. And I know one of your more recent blogs is about the glucose monitor and everything that it can do,
Yes.
and how much it does help. So if you want to learn more about Dani and her programs, we will have all her information listed in the show notes, including links to her website and social media. Her podcast is Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. We will also have those links for you. In the meantime, you can watch it on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast. I just want to thank you because you always provide so much wonderful advice. You give us practical, actionable um, information in an easy way so we're not overwhelmed. And it's in a place where most of us are stuck. So thank you so much for what you do. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Julia, and I hope that um I just want people to walk away with just a knowing that their bodies are these miracles that are designed to heal themselves. Like if I cut my hand, what do I need to do for my hand to heal? Nothing. It's just going to start doing it.
Yes.
The same process is happening inside all the time. And so I feel that when so many of us are not feeling well, and this was me, I just felt like my body was against me. And that's a really dark place to be because our bodies are with us. They're trying so hard. And
Yeah.
sometimes they just need to be put in the right environment. Like if a fish was in a dirty cage, if I gave it organic food, would it be healthier? Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be. But is that taking care of the problem?
No.
No. So sometimes I just like learning about light and circadian rhythm, like it just opens us up to like, oh, our environments are also just as important as the food that we're eating. So
Mhm.
I want like if you're even a little bit open to doing any of these strategies with light, you're going to get a huge like bang for your buck like again with these strategies and just pairing them together. I mean, you'll finally start to see hope and light at the end of the tunnel. So
And that gives a lot of us hope. Thank you so much. I really
my pleasure.
genuinely appreciate it. Thank you for joining me today on Moving Mattresses and 3-inch heels. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest tips for living your best life. Until next time, stay fabulous and remember, your wellness journey matters. Self-care is a necessity and it does not require an apology. I'll see you soon.